But right now, I wanted to go to Paul Watson. In fact, it's one of the top stories up on prisonplanet.com. Maybe we'll punch that up for folks. And it deals with the founding of the European Union by Nazis. Now, this is no secret. We actually cover this in Endgame Blueprint for Global Enslavement. But the founding members of Bilderberg are also the founding members of the World Wildlife Fund to teach the public, as the Club of Rome admitted in the 1960s, and then again in republished documents in the early 90s, one written by Richard N. Haas, that humans are the enemy and that the world government must be convened and set up to carry out the controlled extermination of the majority of the population. Now, I'm not the one saying this. They're the ones saying it. And the Nazis killed tens of millions of people. That war killed 20 million Germans, at least 20 million Russians, 1 million Americans and Brits. And you have to remember, the King of England, Edward VIII, had to advocate the throne because it came out he was a Nazi, photos of him with Hitler, supporting Hitler. When the war started, he had to run out of Spain, and then basically was told to get out of town and go to the British Virgin Islands, and he basically left for the war, a disgrace, and was no longer the king because he was a big Nazi. And this was all a setup. Hitler was told, you're going to attack the communists, you're going to take over France. They had a deal with the Vichy French, this is on record, to where the British military would evacuate out to Dunkirk. Hitler would just act like he was attacking them. This has now been declassified, and have Hermann Goering have the Luftwaffe bomb out to sea far away from the ships. And the film reels got released, and they said, Hitler's not attacking. Then the documents have come out, and it's even on PBS, that Hitler, quote, didn't want to attack the British. Well, they had a deal. Then suddenly the British announced, we are going to attack you. I mean, talk about conspiracy theories. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. But the Maginot Line and all of that didn't fail in World War II. And Hitler's blitzkrieg, was not the great success. I mean, the Polish held out just defending one city for many days. And they had horse-drawn carriages and people fighting tanks with swords. The French had a modern military. The Vichy French dominated the entire military and most of the French government. And they wanted a coup of France. That's why Hitler took over in a week, came and did a tour of Paris, and then left. And then they moved the capital down to the city of Vichy. Hence it gets the name, the Vichy French government. They were the collaborators. It was all staged. It was meant to be a European Union takeover by Hitler, and he would take over Europe, and then he would unify Europe as the new Germania to attack the Russians and the Bolsheviks and then exterminate most of them. They were going to do blood tests and other genotypes, and they had other quack systems of measuring the skull and nose and things of all the Slavs, and those that were Aryan enough would live, the rest would be killed. Hitler wouldn't bomb, once he got betrayed, quote, by the British, he wouldn't bomb London. And he gave speeches saying this is the most pure Aryans there are because they weren't overrun as much as Germany was, by the Mongols and some of those invasions that went on even into Western Europe. And so I don't want to bomb and kill any of our precious Aryans. And so England flew it right into Berlin and bombed it just to get Hitler to attack, and then he did. But the whole thing is it was a betrayal, in quotes. This is all on record in mainline history books. They just don't make a big deal out of it on TV, but you get a piece of it here, a piece of it there. And that's why the Deputy Führer, Rudolf Hess, flew in. He'd been a World War I fighter race. He flew in his own plane, parachuted in with all these magical amulets saying, I have the peace treaty, I have the secret deal. You weren't supposed to attack us. You're supposed to let us take Europe. And then, the King of England was going to rule it all with Hitler being the political leader and Edward VIII being the sovereign leader. And they were going to have the Vatican as the new religious, center reborn. And that was what was in the documents. And we covered that to some extent in Endgame. And then Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, a German prince, Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, related to the Queen and Edward VIII closely. He was a Nazi. So then when they decided to switch and have the House of Orange fight against the Nazis, they had him at a photo op with a machine gun shooting at Luftwaffe planes as they came in. He then ran across the channel, joined the RAF, was good buddies with Prince Philip, the eugenicist as well, who says, blacks aren't humans and get rid of them. And then you have the eugenics set up in England and the United States that Hitler quotes in Mein Kampf and quotes in all these speeches and giving awards to Thomas Watson of IBM and Margaret Sanger and the Colgates and others, and them giving him awards, and different industrialists in the U.S. giving Hitler, gifts of $2 million in gold bars, and just, Hitler on the cover of Time magazine. In fact, pull up Hitler on the cover of Time, 1938. I think it's the year. Oh, how great Hitler is and how wonderful he is. And, at the Olympic Games before that, how he was the savior of the world and going to save the environment and a vegetarian and for the animals and biospheres and eugenics and the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, fully funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. That's all mainline history. And let me tell you, folks, when I cover this is when I get the death threats and the calls, and they turn the Nazis loose on us, claiming we work for Israel and all this other bull. No, I come on air and admit Israel's part and parcel, funded by these people. Israel took billions of dollars to irradiate 110,000 Jewish children, most of them to death, the ringworm children, mainstream, and at the top, it's the top Zionists took money from Jews trying to get out and did deals where Jews couldn't run to New York or London, where they had to go to Palestine and they had to pay the Zionist groups $1 million to get out of Germany. Show people Hitler right here. I'm telling you, at the top, it's all controlled by these people. There he is, Time magazine. Here, scroll down and read the caption. It says Hitler. I can't read that. I know you can pull up the actual article. In fact, just pull up. I mean, there's gardening magazines, Time Life, Time magazine. Oh, Hitler, he's so great. My grandfather remembers listening in Dallas, Texas in the 30s to Hitler speeches, and they were translating him and how great he was. He remembers listening to WBAP, and he's dead now. I'd love to have him on air. And he remembers hearing the Hitler speeches and how great Hitler was. Yeah, there it is, Man of the Year. Adolf Hitler, 1938. It talks about how great he is. God, print that for me. Maybe I'll read some of that. This is what I'm telling you. All right, I'm going to go to Paul Watson, then we're going to get to your calls and all the attacks on free speech that are happening. But I'm telling you, I don't care if they're Chinese, I don't care if they're Jewish, if they're German, if they're British, if they're Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, Japanese. The Japanese were huge into eugenics. They loved Hitler, the Japanese leadership. Elites all believe in breeding and that they're the master group. And I'm telling you, they're not Catholics, they're not Protestants, they're not Jews, they're not any of this at the top. They are eugenicists, ladies and gentlemen. My dad had a famous botanist who was a Jewish professor at UT, who was the head of the group when my dad was in high school, already at UT, and this advanced placement thing, who they then, of the 125 smartest, pulled aside 6, and it was Professor Speer running it, and he was Jewish, explaining to them about the master race and all of this, but that Hitler just went too far, and that they're really master strains in most groups, and that they've got to cull the people, basically. I mean, it's everything everywhere. This is what the elites believe, ladies and gentlemen. And so if we don't face the full magnitude of what's happening, it's only going to get worse. So I go to Paul Watson now with these big new developments that are up on prisonplanet.com. And last week he broke, when the news came out, which we already knew, but now it's mainstream news. People can't deny it, with more detail, how Bilderberg brags now in all these papers they secretly set up the EU, just like we sued and got their documents. They're running the North American Union. Paul Watson, big news.
Hello, Alex. Good to be back.
Good to have you here.
Yeah. first of all, most of what you just talked about regarding the Second World War, Hitler and the Nazis, is all laid out in William Shirer's book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which was written in the early 60s, which is considered the seminal book on the Third Reich. And all of this stuff's in there, and yet people treat it with suspicion when we talk about it all these years later. So
yeah, well, stay there, Paul. Let's break down the new info. And folks, I'm telling you, they're setting up world government to kill most of you listening right now. Okay, well, most of us are dead if we don't beat these people. It's us or them. They run everything. We better turn that around. Stay with us.